today I want to talk to you about the circular sewing attachment for the sewing machine. It's a fun accessory that you can use to sew circles and do decorative type of things. They all work pretty much the same in that you would put your fabric on the pin, which is very sharp by the way, and you set the radius that you want of your circle, and as the sewing machine sews, the fabric goes around in a circle. So here's some examples of things that you're probably quite familiar with that the circular attachment does. Obviously, it sews in circles, and you can use your decorative stitches and just make a pretty design. You can also couch different yarns, ribbon, etc. down. Use your decorative stitches again to do arcs and semicircles. Here's just some more examples of sewing in circles and just some semicircles. Another project that's very familiar probably to you is the mock cathedral window. And here's just a couple of examples in different colors. And that, as well as the quilting, is all done on the circular sewing attachment. A couple of little coasters. Another common thing to do with it is to either do a raw edge circle or applique a circle down on a project. And for a mock drunkard's path block, you can cut the block into quarters and then mix them around and reattach them. And as you can see, these three are actually the same, so they're just mixed up. Now the technique that I'm going to show you is you actually piece the drunkard path block on the circular sewing attachment. So I will show that to you later. Another thing you can do with the circular sewing attachment is on small pieces, you can do the quilting. Has to be small though. And on blocks for a quilt, you can quilt like 12-inch blocks and then put them together in a quilt as you go method. And there's just another example of larger arcs for the quilting. Now, with this technique that I'm going to show you, you can make these convex shapes any size that you want. In this particular quilt, you can see this shape is pretty small, much smaller than in this particular quilt here. So that's the beauty of this technique I'm going to show you. You don't have to have templates, it's quick and it's simple, and it's a piece drunkard path block. So in the next video I'll show you how to set up to make the blocks. I have my sewing machine set up with the circular sewing attachment on. I like the the one hole like needle plate. And I have lowered my foot pressure. I've increased my stitch length just because I'm going to be sewing through 8 blocks of fabric. The dot here represents where I want to put the fabric on the pin, and it's 1/4 inch in. So put the fabric onto the pin. I've already set it for the setting that I know that I want to sew the convex shapes. We are sewing the convex shapes at this moment, and you just kind of guide the fabric. It's going to shift a little, but it's okay. And as you can see, that's a nice little arc, and then you're just going to take and cut that kind of right along the line, right outside the line. You do not want to cut inside the line because that is part of the seam allowance. So just like that, you have 8 shapes ready to be sewn into a block. The next thing you want to do is take your freezer paper template while it's on that setting, and in the directions it tells you how to, what size square to cut and how to make this. And I'm just going to sew in a quick circle. You need to stabilize the convex pieces because, as you can see, with the sewing And with fabric stretching, it would distort the fabric otherwise. So at this point, you're just going to cut in half, cut in half again, and then you're going to cut, you can cut inside. These do not need to be precise at all, they're just to stabilize the convex shapes. And then normally what I will do is I will put these on my ironing board and then just line them up with the right side of the fabric down and place those so that I can get a sewing line without, these don't need to be precise either. It's going to, you're going to sew along here, so you don't want to catch the freezer paper, and then iron them down, and then those will be ready to sew together into a Drunkard Path block. So now I'm going to change my setting to what I need to sew the concave pieces. Same concept, the 8 blocks, they're going to go on the pin 1/4 of an inch away. You always want to put the cover back on too because it's that pin's very sharp. And then sew the shape. And these you're going to cut with pinking shears. And this you can cut right on the line. And you have 8 concave pieces ready to be sewn into the Drunkard Path block. These I usually will keep and either make a smaller Drunkard Path block, or I'll sew them together and make them into yo-yos. Okay, I have reset my sewing machine to a normal stitch length, and I have set my sewing attachment to the sewing line. The measurements are very simple. You have your sewing line, which you take note of, and then the convex shape is 1/4 of an inch greater than the sewing line. The concave is 1/4 of an inch less than the sewing line. So you're working in intervals of 1/4 inches. So you put the convex shape on to the pin, and you just want to kind of check and make sure that you didn't have like a severe shifting problem when you were making your shapes, and that you actually have a good seam allowance. So that's the concept. You're going to just have a nice sewing, and that's where the precision comes in. The circular sewing attachment is going to be sewing the nice curve for you, so it doesn't really matter if your seam allowances match up or are correct. So on the concave piece, you're just going to stretch it slightly, because that's kind of the shape that it's going to get sewn into. So you set it down just a little bit past the edge, and this particular foot actually pulls from the back, so I need to push it along for the first few stitches. So once you've got a few stitches, the goal is to, this is approximately 1/4 of an inch away, that's why I like to use this foot, and the goal is to kind of keep the edge of the top piece, the concave piece, kind of along the edge there, 1/4 of an inch from the needle. Now down here, you want to just support it. I like to put my finger up against the foot, and to just make sure that it stays flat as it's rotating around the pin. And you don't need to pull it. The sewing machine is going to pull the fabric along. And on the top, you're just kind of keeping it out of the way and making sure that you can see I'm kind of pulling, just kind of pulling. I'm not pulling this way or anything. And keeping this along about 1/4 of an inch away. And as you get along here, you want to really make sure that you're supporting this part, that it's out flat from the pin. And you just kind of pull it along like that, and you're done. So as simple as that, you have a pieced Drunkard Path block, and you can remove the freezer paper. So what you want to do is to check and make sure that you have a good seam allowance on both sides, and you do. The other thing that you're then going to check to make sure that it's going to be a good block, because this is the important part, you're going to fold it in half at the corner and just make sure that those line up, and you can see absolutely perfect. So at this point, you're going to take your ruler, which I forgot to get out, and first line it up and trim any of the extra, line it up along the convex piece and trim off any of the little white of the concave. And then you're going to flip it, and this block is going to be trimmed down to 3.5 inches, and then you just trim the excess off and you'll have a very nice junker path block. So that's the concept. Once you've done that, you can continue by just sewing a new cutting line for your convex shape, which you can see that I have done there, and then that to put little arcs in. And then you would cut that off, reset it, your attachment to whatever your sewing line is going to be, and then sew on the coordinating concave piece. And you can just keep going out as many times as you want, sewing arcs on. The other thing you can do is just kind of change the design up a little bit. And instead of putting the pin on this corner and sewing another arc, if you put the pin on the other corner and then slide your attachment to wherever it might fit in, and I've already stabilized that. You can sew in this direction. It's hard to see on there, but then you would cut that and continue the same process and just get a different shape that you can make. And that's it. Hope you enjoy making your Drunkard Path blocks on your circular sewing attachment.